welcome to episode 1 of The Gut Solution. I'm your host, Sarah Otto. For the longest time, people thought of the gut as a system to simply absorb nutrients and eliminate waste. It was thought of as a food processor that had little to do with heart disease, mental health, autoimmune disease, arthritis, fatigue, dementia, aging, fertility, skin issues, cancer, or obesity. However, that has all changed. New science has finally caught up with what the legendary Greek physician and nutritionist Hippocrates penned 2,500 years ago. He said, all disease begins in the gut. And the latest research not only confirms that the gut is important for immune, mental, and hormonal health, it's absolutely vital. The gut is not just a tube that moves food from one end of the body to the other. It's our body's first line of defense between us and the outside world. But more than that, it's a complex system teeming with trillions of living microscopic organisms, a community of bacteria, viruses, and fungus called the microbiome, who are crucial to a whole host of bodily functions. In this episode, you'll discover why you should care about gut health. You'll also find out about the surprising ways our guts are damaged in our day-to-day lifestyle. You'll discover that the so-called leaky gut syndrome is actually real. And finally, you'll discover the little-known ways to repair your damaged gut and then experience true health.
We've realized that all health starts in the gut. This is the keystone that you need to bring all of your health together. And it's fascinating because we have, for a very long time in medicine, dismissed the gut as just being this place that produces poop. And now what we're seeing is that it all comes back to this one place. This is where the immune system lives. This is where we control serotonin, which controls our mood, controls our energy levels, our focus. This is metabolism. The way that we interact with our food, the way that we process our food, the nutrients that we find in our food, and how we make the most of those nutrients. Even cancer prevention starts with gut health. And so when you go down the line and you look at the way that we process our food, metabolism, our immune system, our mood and energy levels, I didn't even mention this yet, but I really need to, the interaction with our genes. And you go down the line and you look at all of these things, and what you realize is that this is what defines health. This is an all-encompassing list of everything that is relevant to human health. And it all starts right here in the gut.
And why is the gut or the digestive system so important? It's because to me, I liken it to the roots of the body. So if you look at a plant is grounded by its roots, and through the root system is where the plant absorbs all of the nutrients. So if the leaves of the plant are sick, you're not going to treat the leaves. You're going to go and look at the roots and see, well, what's happening at the roots? Is it getting all the minerals that it needs? Why is the plant sick? So the same way, if the body is sick, we need to look at the root. And our root system is the digestive system.
Let's start off with just something real simple. You are what you eat, okay? That's only if your gut actually works. So if you come to me and you have a totally dysfunctional gut, and I give you, a handful of supplements to take, and I put you on this really good diet, how much benefit is that going to be to you?
Yeah, I'm only halfway there if I can't actually digest it.
Right. If you can't do anything with what I'm giving you.
The gut is really the root of the tree. All naturopaths have that as our most sacred tenet, that the digestive tract is so pivotal to our health that unless the root is healthy, the whole tree cannot be healthy. So that's always been our approach. I've been in practice for over 20 years now, so pretty much every patient I see, whether that's rheumatoid arthritis or SIBO or whatever that may be, anxiety, we always consider the digestive tract as part of our comprehensive approach.
I love that. So the gut is the root of the tree. If your gut isn't healthy, nothing works.
Nothing can be healthy.
Yeah.
So sometimes people take tons of supplements for things like headaches or fatigue or insomnia, and it really actually is their digestive tract that's driving that, and none of those pills are ever going to get lasting results.
As Hippocrates said, right? I mean, we all know this, but maybe some people don't. He said all disease begins in the gut, and now research is catching up with antiquity that about the majority of health problems that we face today, at least to some degree, begin in the gut, if not entirely. So it's a major facet. As a functional medicine practitioner, it's something that I see on an almost hourly basis. These far-reaching implications to the power that the microbiome wields on our health. So it's major in many ways. It's 75% of our immune system. So when you look at the epidemic rise of autoimmunity, you have to really look at where the predominance of the immune system resides, which is in the microbiome, and the impact that it has on neurological symptoms, where 95% of serotonin, your neurotransmitter, is made in your gut and stored in your gut. And your gut's actually formed from the same fetal tissue as the brain. So when babies are growing in their mom's womb, they are growing from the same fetal tissue, and they're inextricably linked for the rest of our lives through the gut-brain axis. And people don't think of this, obviously, right? This isn't like you're not watching the news and seeing this, but this is the power that our gut has on our brain and our hormones, our immune system. So it's very important. When you look at the numbers of chronic diseases, you cannot ignore the microbiome.
I have a little saying I tell all my patients, that if we can heal your microbiome will heal you.
I love that.
And it's fundamental. It really is fundamental. Allergies, autoimmune disease, immunodeficiency, inflammatory diseases, not to mention digestive diseases.
That was a given.
Right, you're kind of a given, you know. A little important there. All of these stem directly from the gut. You can't heal these problems if you don't heal the gut. So you can treat all of them with all kinds of drugs and procedures, and eventually you can cut things out and do all that kind of thing, but there's no healing happening, all right? Healing of the gut and the microbiome has to occur in order to get over digestive problems, number one. But autoimmune diseases, allergies of any sort, not just like, you know, seasonal allergies, but food allergies. Again, to recap what the microbiome is, it is the layers of microbes that inhabit the gut wall. And they literally, they ferment. They do the last stage of fermenting our food, extracting all the individual nutrients from our food and plugging them into the receptor sites on the wall of our gut. So extremely important. But I consider the microbiome and the probiotics as part of our immune system. And if that's the case, they make up 70 to 80% of our immune system. Okay? So it's a lot. It's, you know, I would say right around 80% really of our total immune system, because you have your central microbiome, right? Your upper respiratory system, ear, nose, throat, your lungs, okay, have another microbiome. Your skin has its own microbiome. Your urinary reproductive tract has its own microbiome. And each one of those is a window into the central microbiome. So whatever's going on in the central microbiome will also show up in these other places. So let's say you have lots of sinus congestion. Okay, it's a sign that there's congestion in your gut microbiome. Let's say you have, you know, respiratory issues and lots of mucus and things like that, right? You're going to have the same issue in your gut. Let's say you You have recurrent urinary tract infections, okay? That's not going to go away until you correct the microbiome. When you rebuild the microbiome, it will heal that urinary microbiome so that you don't have these recurrent infections. It'll kick the invaders out. Okay? You have skin issues, okay? Say acne or eczema or rosacea even, inflammatory issues in the skin. That means there's inflammatory issues going on in the gut. And the skin isn't going to clear up until the gut does. Okay, so there's a lot. This is a major component to our immune system that has been very, very abused, I would say, in the medical world. Totally misunderstood. We have a lot of chronic diseases today because of overuse of antibiotics and overuse of, different medications.
And then we, of course, have this huge microbiome that is, I'm gonna have to think in kilos here, but it's about 2 kilos of just microorganisms. And if you think about that, microscopic organisms taking up that much weight and space in our body, that is a lot of microorganisms that are living in and on our body. And they are actually also in constant communication with all the other systems of the body. With the brain, it controls how we feel, how we think, how we remember and learn, and how we sleep. All of those things are because of this microbiome that's living in our gut, that's communicating with other parts of the body, including our immune system as well. So the gut is really, it has its fingers everywhere. And if we have an unhealthy gut, then all of those systems are out of balance. And that means that the body is going to be out of balance and we're not going to feel well.
Wow. 2 kilograms. So what's that in pounds?
It's like 3 to 5 pounds.
If you think of all your human cells, think of how many trillions of cells that is. Take that number and multiply it by 10. You're now dealing with the number of bacterial cells that you've got. We're outnumbered 10 to 1 bacterial to human cells. Now here's what blows me away even more. Take all of the genetic material in your human cells and multiply that by 100. That is how much we are outnumbered bacterial DNA to human DNA. So that's like absolutely crazy when you think about it, right? It makes us actually more genetically bacteria than genetically human. And what we do to our bacteria in our gut is going to have a huge influence on our entire biochemistry, our entire physiology, and how we look, how we feel, and how we think.
Hello everybody, welcome. We just wanted to drop in and say a quick hello before you jump into episode 1. My name's Sarah and
I'm Matt.
And we're the creators of the documentary series you're about to watch. It's our privilege to have you here and you're so welcome, and we're so excited for you to see all this life-changing information that has not only changed my life but so many people around the globe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where did this all start? Why did we start and create this series?
This journey started when I was unwell. I struggled with autoimmune disease, I struggled with joint pain, I struggled with depression and sometimes anxiety as well. And conventional doctors didn't have the answers for me. It was really quite a tough time for me. But thankfully, I found information like this, like what you're about to learn, and that made all the difference for me.
For me, seeing you and not being able to help you was really hard. Like you said, and when you started talking about gut health, I was like, come on, gut health? Like, this didn't make any sense to me as to why we should be looking at the gut. But lo and behold, you got better.
I got better.
And so I had to shut up and put my skepticism aside and learn. And I guess what you're about to see is the culmination of all of that. This is like an 8-part series, and it goes for a long time because there is so much to learn, like ridiculous amounts to learn. And for the skeptics out there, like maybe like yourself or like me, I'll just put aside some of your skepticism and have an open mind, because some of the things you're about to learn may shock you, may challenge you, but we just want it to be practical. Start implementing it, start learning, start taking notes, and more importantly, share this as well, because as you're about to see, this information changes lives. It's changed your life, it's changed our life, and those that have seen it already around the world, we've had incredible feedback as from them as well. So strap yourself in, it's going to be a crazy journey.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that again. Share this information. You don't want to get to the end of the week and go, oh, I wish my daughter knew this. I wish I shared this with my coworker that I know struggles with some of these issues. Now's the time to get the message out, because I don't want anyone in your community to miss a minute of this amazing, precious information.
So how do you share? Like what
Oh, there's some buttons below.
Yeah.
You can share on Facebook. You can share the link over email, message. You can call your friend and tell them the URL, and they can just register in the exact same way that you do.
Give it www.gutsolution.com.
It might be easy to text.
Yeah.
But we're so excited. Make sure your friends get on board.
Forgive us as you go on this journey, because this is just a husband and wife team. Like, we grabbed some cameras, we got on a plane, and begrudgingly, I was like, okay, we're about to film this whole entire series around the world and interview over 40 experts and fund it ourselves. And so it's, amazingly, it was self-funded, and it's been quite a risk to get this information to you. You know, if you're just interested, if you just watch this first episode and you see, oh wow, like, which we know it's going to happen, just have a look at what is on offer if you were to own this series today, because that is the reason why you're seeing this right now. It's people getting behind us that buy these products, that gives us the ability for you to,
see this for free.
And not everyone can afford that, and that's great, and that's what makes it available to give to the masses for free for this short period of time. So yeah, just consider that, and no pressure, but we just wanted to give that as an opportunity because that would mean the world to us.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's not just a series that you'll get to own, you'll get to be part of our community, our Facebook group, you'll get tons of resources, Q&As. If you just click on the link below, you'll see it all, but I won't waste any of your time because episode 1 awaits, and I'm so excited for you to see it. Enjoy.
Bye.
Studies show there is a link between gut diversity and health. We thrive when there is a balance between good and bad bacteria. But all too often, our lifestyle habits damage that fragile balance. Did you know that a single round of antibiotics can decimate the bacteria that we rely on to digest our food and support our immune system? In the absence of these desirable species, pathogenic bacteria and parasites proliferate. What's more, symptoms of poor gut health may not be what you might expect and extend beyond typical digestive complaints like gas and bloating and constipation. Have you experienced brain fog, joint pain, depression, anxiety, allergies? All of these symptoms can be caused by an imbalance in our gut microbiome. Let's see how we can overcome these complaints by addressing the root of the problem and restoring a healthy diversity of beneficial bacteria in our guts. So what would be some symptoms of somebody not having a healthy gut?
Well, so some of them might be gut symptoms just directly, and that could be bloating, burping, gas. It could be constipation or diarrhea. It could be indigestion. It could be inflammatory bowel disease, where there's really more profound inflammation there. But also it can extend to things like inflammation in other parts of the body. So it could be eczema, it could be asthma, it can be psoriasis, it can be autoimmune conditions. And then taking it even a step farther, which people really never knew, but now we really have a lot of scientific evidence to show this, it can include things like migraines or ADHD or seizure disorder or OCD or tics. So basically, if you have a symptom, it is likely that the gut flora is playing a role. And if your gut is out of balance, then it's definitely going to impact you in other ways as well.
It's like if you just look at digestion, the problem that I find here for people is that just because something's common, they think it's normal. Just because something's common doesn't make it normal. I mean, digestive problems, chronic health problems are ubiquitous, but they shouldn't be settled for, and they shouldn't just be chalked up to, it's just something that's normal. So I would start with the low-grade digestive symptoms, the bloating, maybe the intermittent constipation, diarrhea. Those are things that people just go about their life. It's not impeding their work, it's not impeding their life. So they think, oh, it's normal, and they're just really numb to the fact that these are your body's check engine lights. These are the signs that your body's saying something is off here, but they just go about their life. So I think starting with digestion is a good idea. It doesn't have to be an extreme Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or some inflammatory bowel issue for there to be a check engine light. And this is a continuum of inflammation and a continuum of gut problems that people should check in as early as they can with their body to say, what's going on here? But then the impact of the gut on the brain is something that I see quite often. People with anxiety, people with depression, people with brain fog, people with fatigue, with its roots, at least to some degree, in the microbiome. And obviously it's bi-directional. The gut's influencing the brain and the brain's influencing the gut. But oftentimes I find the second brain, which is what in the medical literature is referred to the microbiome, this second brain. And if you think about it, I know that I'm weird, but if you look at the gastrointestinal system, it even resembles the brain. I don't think that's an accident when it's formed from the same fetal tissue. As when people are dealing with anxiety and depression, they're not thinking about their gut. And obviously people with anxiety maybe have an increased rate of IBS, and there's a connection there. But oftentimes people are so far removed, they think their mental health issues or their neurological symptoms have nothing to do with their gut.
The research is at the point where we know that a dysbiotic ecosystem is a main driver of metabolic disease, type 2 diabetes. And this is very much tied into the microbiota. We see Alzheimer's disease is becoming more and more common. This is being linked in to the gut microbiota. Even things like Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis are now being linked in to gut health too. So I think it's imperative, even if you don't have gut symptoms, that you actually take on board the importance of the gut ecosystem, because it's pivotal long term. And these things can again arguably be entirely prevented. And at earlier time points by nurturing a particular type of gut ecosystem.
Why do you think that gut health is such an issue for people in this day and age? What are we doing that's making it such an epidemic?
What aren't we doing, right? Yeah. Like, there are so many things that are causing problems. Let's take our food source. Every single day we're poisoning ourselves. There are glyphosates and other toxins that are endocrine disruptors and harmful to the ecosystem of our gut that we eat on a daily basis. That's why we need to eat organic, right? That's why we need to have purified water. And people don't know that they're doing that to themselves. I will even sometimes get clients in who have really cleaned up their eating. And they're really, for the most part, doing a pretty good job. And they got a little bit of change, but they're not able to finish getting the change that they're looking for. And we have to really have a long discussion about where their food is sourced from and why they shouldn't drink tap water. And so you have food sources that are contaminated and our water sources that are contaminated. We have medications that people are on that may be covering up the symptom of high blood pressure, or maybe covering up some other sort of disease process, but they are creating an imbalance in the gut biome. You've got antibiotics that do that, right? A lot of people know that now. And antibiotics, sometimes we really just have to have it, and thank God we've got them, because they can save our lives, but they're really overused. And because of the overusage of antibiotics, it has created very antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria that are now very, very, very difficult for the body to get rid of, and difficult even for the medications to be able to fix. And so we've got that. Stress is another one, right? So stress can cause huge problems with our microbiome because it causes a cascade of changes in our entire endocrine system, from our adrenal glands to our thyroid to our female hormones, and all of that goes in and actually affects our gut health as well. So, I mean, those are just a few things, right?
So how does tap water affect our gut?
So the regulations for our tap water are really not optimal. And there are many contaminants in our tap water, from fluoride to hormones, antibiotics. There are all kinds of things that are maybe deemed as acceptable, but they're really not acceptable. I have a client who, I don't remember exactly what his title is, but his job is to check the water. He takes samples of the water in the city. And he said to me, Dr. V, I will not touch the water because I know what's in it.
Other causes can be medication classes like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like ibuprofen, for example, is a common cause of leaky gut as well. And the severity of this, or the frequency with which it occurs, I think has been underreported in the medical literature up until recently, because we sort of relied on people getting bloody diarrhea and severe gut symptoms before we'd associate, oh yeah, that ibuprofen is causing you gut damage, you're getting pain. But there's some fascinating research where they use this little capsule, it's called the capsule endoscopy, where they swallow that capsule and it would, as it traversed down through the small bowel, it would just take photos of the entire journey. And they found out that when people started taking these non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that are common for arthritic joint complaints, for example, 80% of them had gut damage within 2 weeks, but it was completely asymptomatic. They weren't expressing symptoms, there was no obvious blood in their poo, but it was causing gut damage and gut leakiness.
Are gut diseases on the rise, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, look, I think they probably are on the rise. You know, look, modern lifestyle, stress, rushing around when you're eating, certain medications, so things like antibiotics, which obviously, you know, if you've got some raging bacterial infection, are the best things for you. However, they also do definitely damage the gut. And research is saying that, you know, a single dose of Augmentin, which is a commonly prescribed antibiotic, wipes out the gut flora by about 90%. And most people will be doing a 5-day course, you know, and that's just like one single dose wipes out, you know, so that's huge.
Well, what basically happens is we've got a lot of things attacking us now. We've got, if you've done antibiotics, they've wiped out some of the good strains of probiotics in your gut. Literally, there's real estate in your gut. There's 7 pounds, 6, 7 pounds of microbiome of this bacteria in your gut. And there really is, to a certain extent, no bad bacteria. Everything has a function that's evolved over millions of years. It's just that when we add antibiotics, you suddenly destroy parts of your microbiome. And the most hardy parts of the microbiome are often candida. So they're like the weeds in the garden. So you got the candida, the antibiotics that come in and knock out your plants and knock out the weeds. But the weeds grow back, you know, they're like super. Then you've got antibiotics that go in and cause the gut dysbiosis. Every microbe, your gut is necessary for brain function is necessary for nervous system function, immune function, and so forth. So it regulates. But what was discovered in 2017 is that for every neuron in the brain, there's 7 or 9 microbes that circle around it to make it work. They work synergistically. We didn't know this before. We thought the brain was sterile. But no, the gut produces those microbes which are necessary for your brain to function efficiently. So the gut and the brain are so intimately related, and we're just wiping out our gut with antibiotics, which sometimes can save lives, but we can then replenish ourselves with the wide spectrum of probiotics.
So I brought my children up without antibiotics, without painkillers, no drugs. They had none whatsoever, and that still exists today. But my daughter, at 23 years of age, was told she needed her wisdom teeth taken out. And she went to a doctor where she was living, which was far from me, and under general anaesthetic, they took her wisdom teeth out, and I warned her about the antibiotics. I said, make sure that they do not intravenously give you antibiotics, make sure that they give you a script, and if you need them, we'll take them. If you don't need them, we're not going to take them. We do not want prophylactic antibiotics. So she gets out of the operation, and they said, oh, we gave you prophylactic antibiotics because we were a bit concerned. And she blew up like you wouldn't believe. After that operation, 3 weeks later, she rings me in a state I've never seen. Now, this is a young woman who is capable, independent, vibrant, energetic, can eat anything as far as grains, legumes, nuts, seeds. She can eat anything. So here's this young woman, has this medical operation. 3 weeks later, she rings me in a state of unbelievable panic and anxiety. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with her? I've never seen her do this. So that was the first hint, but I didn't relate it to what had happened. Then the next thing that happened was she gained 6 kilos in weight, just like overnight. She'd gone overseas and she just thought she was eating the wrong foods, but she wasn't. She knew how to eat. Then she started to sleep more and more and more. She would eat and fall asleep. Whenever she would sleep. She got a bloated stomach, she couldn't eat any foods, and this happened over a 12-month period. It was just this gradual thing, and after 12 months I just said to her, sweetie, we need to do something. And as a mum, I was so emotionally involved, and I still get very teary about it now because I'm so angry at what happened.
So when she called me about Casey, you know, it really touched my heart, because Casey, you know, had a situation where she had gone through surgery for her teeth, and she had intravenous antibiotics, and it had completely decimated her gut microbiome to the point that she had parasites growing in her gut or multiplying in her gut, and it was significantly impacting her life. So it was very hard for her to even take care of herself. And then I had Cindy, who was like this red rag to a bull, like, tell me more about the gut, and taking notes. And I would hear her typing and carrying on, typing on her laptop every consult. And yeah, it was interesting, someone who had such an experience with nutrition and having to explain, okay, this is how we use nutrition through fermenting foods. This is how we completely modulate the gut microbiome and what needs to change. And, you know, it was just such a great experience working with someone who knew so much and had the commitment to apply what needed to happen. And so Casey just flourished and shone and came out the other side really quickly. And, you know, she's obviously just doing so well now.
So I was in the kitchen to feed and nourish my baby daughter, you know, who was 23 at the time, in order to, you know, heal myself really and to heal her. And with Kirsty's guidance, we did it. But yeah, as a mum, to see a 23-year-old daughter who went from just the most amazing young woman, independent, fierce, you know, to what she turned into, wanted to move out of life, never wanted to go out, never wanted to do anything. It was tough. It was really tough. So for all those mums out there that are seeing that, there is hope. And I would say it took her about 6 months before we started to see great improvement. And now she's a fully functioning young lady, still gets a little bit of anxiety, but she understands that that's that gut-brain axis, and she knows that she needs to be really strict on what she's doing with her diet and all the procedures that Kirsty had taught her. So, you know, we went from a decimated gut to a girl that was mentally and physically absolutely wrecked as a result of a medical procedure. And now we've got her back, and she knows what she has to do now. She understands exactly what she has to do in order to stay well. And I wonder how many people are in that situation that didn't have the resources that we had, that their girls are now on antidepressants, or the boys are on antidepressants, or they've got an autoimmune disease because their gut's been decimated, and now they have autoimmune diseases.
Particularly in early childhood, infancy, that antibiotic courses have a much stronger impact because the ecosystem is very malleable and changeable at that early times window, and there's a lot of bacterial species in there in teeny tiny amounts, you know, to just around detectable level or below detectable level with most of our technology. But it's very easy to wipe out a species when it's extremely low. And sadly for infants and toddlers before 2.5, 3 years of age, when their ecosystem morphs into a more adult type, they're very susceptible to long-term damage, loss of diversity permanently from antibiotic usage. And we also know from those studies looking at the impact of that long-term is that they have an increased risk of obesity, increased risk of asthma and allergies too. So some of those diseases we see associated with Western living, we're now tying into those early changes in gut microbiota. And I mean, and I should clarify here too that there's a time and place for antibiotics. They save lives, they save limbs, but we know they're being overused. Pretty dramatically. In fact, there was one study published in the Medical Journal of Australia just last year showing that antibiotics were prescribed between 400% and 900% higher than guidelines recommended. And for viral infections like viral bronchitis, which is caused by a virus, 85% of Australians who go to see their doctor are prescribed an antibiotic for that viral infection that it can't possibly help with. And this is happening now, this isn't happening 10 years ago. So we know that they're still being overprescribed. And the message of the loss of diversity and the consequences of antibiotic use are slowly filtering out to the ground level, but it's there in the research. And I think sadly people have focused on the short-term con of antibiotic-associated diarrhea as the only con, and that might be 10 or 15%, depending with some antibiotics less than that. And so if you think that's the only con, then you go, okay, well, I'll use it because there's not much risk. But when we start looking at, no, actually the damage to the ecosystem, that sometimes the disruption, we know from modern studies, lasts for a year and a half or 2 years before the ecosystem looks pretty much like it did before. But there are actually species extinctions that some people argue occur with every course of antibiotics.
Unfortunately, when we use antibiotics, they do not distinguish between the beneficial and the damaging bacteria. It can wipe them all out. When we have a compromised gut microbiome, it can leave us vulnerable to developing something called leaky gut. A healthy gut regulates the barrier between the intestines and the bloodstream, allowing nutrients to flow to our organs and preventing contamination by pathogens. But when our microbiota are imbalanced, we experience inflammation that causes hyperpermeability of the intestinal lining. This means that irritants and toxins are now being released into our bloodstream, damaging and impairing the function of our brain and other vital organs. This sounds serious, right? That's because it is. Let's see what we can learn about the causes of leaky gut and how to heal ourselves from this dangerous condition.
One of the common things that we see in our client base is leaky gut. So what happens is what's really happening is not like this mind, picture in your mind that your gut just becomes like busted and there's an ulcer, there's a hole there and things are leaking out. It's really that on a normal basis, your intestinal lining kind of opens and closes like the supermarket automatically sliding door. It'll open to let certain things in and out, and it'll close at other times so that bugs and things are not just flying through. It's only a problem when the sliding door in the supermarket opens and never closes. That's when it becomes a problem.
Here's what happens as the gut becomes hyperpermeable, undigested food particles and bacteria and fungus and anything else that's in the gut starts floating into the bloodstream. Okay, as it floats into the bloodstream, it clogs up, quote unquote. That's not a medical term, by the way, just clogs up, all right? It clogs up the liver, okay, and eventually the liver gets to where it just can't filter out all the incoming trash, right? Therefore, it spills over into the rest of the bloodstream and starts to go about the body creating or just wreaking havoc, okay? In the body, the immune system it starts responding to all of this stuff coming into the bloodstream, okay, as if it was an invader, okay? Some of them are, but some of them aren't, okay? Some of it is actually food particles. So as these things are happening, our immune system goes into containment mode, okay? So it just is trying to, catch all this stuff coming through, and which means it can't go and, finish out any inflammatory process that's going on in the body elsewhere, right? Because it's busy taking care of this mess, right? So it can't go take care of this other mess from an injury or from whatever, okay? It also gets so tied up with all of this that it can't worry about, the flu that you just got exposed to or all these other things. And so your defenses become unmanned, if you will. So with that, that's how leaky gut plays into it. But there's, remember, leaky gut is the body's response to being irritated. we need to think, what's irritating it?
Well, you've got medications that damage the lining of the gut. You have stress, hormones that are found in the food, different chemicals or pesticides, cleaning products that we're exposed to in our home. That can also do it. So, I mean, you have a myriad of different things. Genetics can also affect the lining of the gut as well.
And all of those things are stopping us from being able to absorb our nutrients properly.
Absolutely.
As well as creating those holes that, you know, that permeability that is exposing our whole bloodstream to our food.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have something that affects the ecosystem of the gut, whether it's antibiotics or other toxins that are affecting the ecosystem of the gut, and it starts to make that ecosystem sick, then the gut isn't working anymore. It's not working properly, and it cannot uptake the nutrients. And at the same time, it's creating a compromise in our immune system, which is then creating a cascade of inflammation in the body. It's creating an immune response where the body starts attacking things that are now floating around in the body that shouldn't be there. And it makes people really, really sick.
There's another problem with leaky gut. It can also cause something called endotoxin to leak into the bloodstream. Endotoxins are present in the outer membranes of pathogenic bacteria. When bacteria such as these release their endotoxins, our body initiates an inflammatory immune response. This inflammation can cause leaky gut or aggravate your symptoms if you're already experiencing it. Body-wide inflammation caused by the presence of endotoxins can contribute to major problems, from autoimmune disease to insulin resistance and obesity.
And when you have a leaky gut, the next thing that happens is you have translocation of toxins from the intestine into your bloodstream. And one of the most potent or the most significant things that get translocated is lipopolysaccharide. Another name for it is endotoxin. And that comes from gram-negative bacteria that live primarily in the large intestine. So as they die, this is on the outer coating, so the outer wall of the bacteria has these lipopolysaccharide endotoxin molecules, and they get released. Well, if your gut lining is healthy, it's going to stay inside the gut lumen. It's not going to come into your bloodstream. But if you have leaky gut, it's just basically the floodgates are open and everything comes in. What you experience is mental fog, fatigue, maybe achiness, muscle aches. And this is all signs that you have leaky gut syndrome, especially if it happens right after you eat, because we know that every time we eat, there's a certain element of what we call endotoxemia. And this is related, this to me is really significant discovery, because there are receptors for endotoxin in the liver, in muscle tissue, in brain tissue, in the hypothalamus, in the brain. And all of those receptors turn on pathways that tell the body, let's produce inflammation. Let's turn on all the inflammatory signals. It's like getting out the fire department, but they're spinning out fire instead of putting out fire, because that's what your immune system does when it's triggered to create inflammation.
And there's a number of research studies that come out of this around this concept of metabolic endotoxemia being a major contributing factor to the obesity epidemic and diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And it is tied into this overproduction of endotoxin in the gut, and tied into the gut leakiness as well. Because the weaker your gut is, the more the endotoxin gets in, and the more of this pro-inflammatory group of bacteria called proteobacteria you have in your gut, the more endotoxin gets in.
So about 50, 80 years ago in the Western world and US, and probably Australia, New Zealand, and Europe is getting there now, farmers started adding antibiotics to their feed because they found that they could fatten up their animals and get more money per pound, right? They're basically making these animals obese and diabetic, breaking their gut. So the animal model to look at leaky gut, what researchers do is they give them a broad spectrum antibiotic. They instantly get leaky, and they can induce cancers or chronic diseases or diabetes. There's an amazing gut researcher named Patrice Canny. He found that the lipopolysaccharide of gram-negative bacteria, if he injected it into animals, if it didn't kill them, it would instantly make them fat because it caused leaky gut. So our protocols and what research shows now is if we can reverse leaky gut, nourish the flora, get the flora back in, everything tightens up and people instantly lose weight. Like through our class program or programs with me, usually the average weight loss is like, if they're trying to lose weight, 10, 20 pounds, usually even in like 3 or 4 months. I personally lost 50 pounds. I was overweight my whole life. I had Hashimoto's really young and all through college and stress. And it took me 5 years to lose weight because I was just, eating still the standard American diet and running a lot and doing triathlons. Now my clients easily can lose 50 pounds in 5 months. Like, it's incredible because of the microbiome, and we're normalizing, resetting rhythms and recolonizing the flora. It's all gut health, gut microbiome medicine.
We've learned that many aspects of our lifestyle can damage our gut and cause leakiness. This leakiness, or hyperpermeability, can cause our bodies to be in a constant, chronic state of inflammation, leading to a whole host of ailments, from obesity to autoimmune disease to cancer. We've learned that things like stress, environmental toxins, certain medications, antibiotics, and chemicals in our foods and water can all be damaging to our gut. However, there is one thing that researchers believe may be one of the worst offenders to our fragile microbiome: glyphosate, the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup.
Think of this. Have you ever seen someone spray glyphosate on a dandelion? Okay, have you ever seen Roundup being used on weeds? Okay.
Yeah.
You ever seen the response, how they just dry up and...
I try not to be around.
Yeah, good, that's good. But
continue,
it's the okay. So they spray the weed with Roundup within a day or two. It's just shriveled up and dry, and there's no life to it, right? Roundup not only kills all of the beneficial microbes in the plant, it bonds to all the mineral ions in the plant and turns them into salts. The moment those calcium or magnesium or phosphorus or zinc, okay, all these essential elements that need to be in the plant in order for it to be healthy, right? The minute they turn into salts, they are, in essence, heavy metals. Even though they're essential nutrients to begin with, glyphosate turns them into a heavy metal.
Wow.
Okay, which shrivels up the plant and it dies. If you're eating GMO food, okay, you're getting some of this in your food. And when you consume this, it's doing the same thing to your gut that it's doing to that plant. Okay, this is one. We also got glyphosate, we got 2,4-D, we got there's there's a whole bunch of these pesticides and herbicides.
And when I started consulting as a nutritionist back in 1985, what I found was that nobody came in for gut issues. There was maybe a little bit of constipation on occasion, but nobody had the bloating, no one had the issues that we see today. But what I have seen in the last maybe 10 years is an extreme increase in the amount of people with gut issues. So something has happened between the 80s and what's happening now. And when we look back in 1995, that was the beginning of genetically modified foods, and Roundup being used, or otherwise glyphosate being used on our foods. But I really believe that the gut has become a really important health issue is because people's guts are being decimated, and more likely their microbiome is being decimated by our food, by the overuse of antibiotics.
Now, what's the difference between a antibiotic, okay, which is a bug killer, and a pesticide?
Seems the same, doesn't
it? Isn't that an interesting thing? Yeah? Okay, so if your food has pesticides, that's kind of like taking an antibiotic, isn't it? Okay, you're going to get some of this residue. It's going to do the same thing in your gut as if you were consuming an antibiotic. Okay, now that's just agricultural chemicals. Okay, what about preservatives? Preservatives are both either antibiotic or antifungal. Let's go over to water now. Okay, what is, okay, if you want to keep a pool from carrying disease, right? You got to keep the pH at a certain level by using what? Chlorine, yeah. Right? Why? Well, the chlorine kills the bugs, right? Now, if you add fluoride to it, it's even more powerful. Okay, it's even better bug killer, right? So, if you're drinking chlorinated, fluorinated water, what's that doing to your gut?
Wiping them out.
Exactly, exactly.
If there's residues of glyphosate in there, it's an antibiotic. It's been patented, was patented in 2010 as an antibiotic. So we eat it and it kills our microbiome. In that some of our microbiome, they produce our aromatic amino acids, they produce our folic acid, they produce our enterobactin. If that destroys them, then we're not producing them either. So it's not in our food. So our aromatic amino acids are for our neurotransmitters. There's a huge increase in gut disorders and there's a huge increase in mental illness. And they're linked. It's a gut-brain axis. So we're destroying the gut, we're destroying the ability to make neurotransmitters, our brain and our nervous systems are not working properly. We're starting to have multiple sclerosis increase, Parkinson's disease increase, mental illnesses decrease as a result of this agricultural practice. And just recently, in 2018, we had a case where a gentleman won. His name was Dwayne Johnson, and he was he basically said that Roundup caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the case was proven that it did cause it, and he was paid out. And now there are like 8,000 plaintiffs waiting in the sidelines that have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, have used Roundup, and this is just the cancer side. We're not even talking about the gut side.
Everything is critical and important. And what do we do every day? Eat and drink. So I tell people, whatever you're eating or drinking is either feeding or fighting your illness or your life. And so we need to be mindful of every single thing that we eat and we drink. It's not just the food we eat, and our food today is not exactly healthy with the genetically modified foods, with the chemicals, with the insecticides, the pesticides, on and on. So that means we have to take extra care of ourselves now because of our industrialized technological society, because no one is checking to make sure what we're actually putting in and on our body is okay. And we've got to be mindful and take a stand now, because illness is at an all-time high now all over the world, not just the United States, but all over the world, and we've got to take a stand for humanity.
So if you're eating the SAD diet, which could be the standard Australian diet or the standard American diet, we call it the SAD diet, where you have breakfast cereals in the morning, if it's been sprayed with glyphosate or Roundup, which it will be, then you are eating it in the morning, an antibiotic in the morning, a chelating agent, and the minerals are being taken out of the system. You're killing the bacteria. So you're eating in the morning, you're having maybe a muffin at morning tea, and then you may decide that you're going to have a sandwich which will have wheat in it or a grain in it. You're using canola oil because you've been told it's healthy, which has it sprayed on it. You're eating foods that are processed in any way. They'll have canola oil, have food additives. It'll just, it's never ending. So every minute of the day, you're taking an antibiotic, a known antibiotic, a patented antibiotic, and you're destroying the gut bacteria, and therefore you're destroying the mucus lining that is lining your gut.
And so it is very hard to escape glyphosate, and the effects on the gut are well researched, and also begging for way more research so that we can finally put the nail in that coffin and get on with being regenerative farmers, frankly. Yeah, so there are a number of ways that food can be toxic, but I think we do ourselves a disservice to kind of just talk about that and then not talk about what isn't, because we can then go, oh my gosh, everything's going to make me die. And it's, again, that really negative kind of fear-based thinking. And so while it's important to identify where we want to reduce and swap, it's really important to also realize that people's picture of success is going to be so different right now and today and next week and next month based on where they live, what they have access to. It takes a good couple of years to really start to feel like you're humming in the food you procure and then cook for your family. So I'm a huge fan of thinking, okay, this is a journey, and what is my lowest hanging fruit, right? So my lowest hanging fruit is actually our family goes through a ton of apples, and I know from the EWG's Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 that apples are one of the most sprayed crops in the world. So I'm going to go and get to a farmer's market where there might be a small-time grower who isn't labelled certified organic, but they grow everything organically. They don't use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, all that kind of stuff, herbicide. And I'm going to buy a couple of kilos of apples from them a week. So that's an example. Like, think about, I say this in my book, what are the top 3 things your family eats the most of? What's the biggest, highest volume? It could be apples, you might be a big milk drinking family, carrots, whatever it is. You might eat a lot of chicken or whatever. Just swap your top 3 as your starting point, and everyone can make that a project. Even if it's still going to take a couple of months to figure it out, take some budget from there, put it there. We have to feel like we can get a run on the board. Otherwise, we're not going to be motivated to keep making practical changes. And once you've got a run on the board, you feel a bit clever, you feel a bit empowered, then you're way more likely to actually put some more runs on the board. Some of my other suggestions are to form a co-op. If it's too expensive to buy organic pantry staples like your nuts and seeds and eggs and things like that, it is incredibly simple to form a co-op, and you instantly get everything at wholesale prices as long as you're prepared to then divvy it up with all your friends. I mean, if you really want this, you can do it. You just have to really want it.
We've learned that antibiotics and pesticides damage our gut. I hope you feel empowered, because by changing basic habits, you can make a huge difference to your health. There is another hidden issue that you need to know about. It's wheat, and it's partially due to a protein called zonulin. Wheat is often regarded as an ancient part of the human diet. So how can it be causing diet-related diseases that are relatively new? Well, there are many breeds of wheat. We used to consume ancient varieties, but in the 1960s, a new high-yield variety of wheat was developed that increased the productivity of crops. We've since discovered that this new variety, semi-dwarf wheat, contains less nutrients and more gluten than the grains humans have previously consumed. Gluten triggers an inflammatory immune response, which allows zonulin to escape the intestinal lining. Zonulin is produced by the gut. When it passes into the bloodstream, our body treats it as a pathogenic invader and initiates a body-wide immune response that funnels systemic energy away from digesting, healing, and fighting infections. It sounds exhausting because literally it is. In fact, fatigue is a common symptom of this problem.
One of the factors that we know is a big issue in the gut is eating gluten for people. It sort of doesn't matter whether you're allergic or not. We've learned that that when we eat gluten, it elevates this protein called zonulin that increases the permeability of the gut. It's little microscopic holes in the cellular junctions, and then since gluten is what created those holes, that's the first thing that gets through and activates the immune system, because it shouldn't be in the blood should be sterile. So when that gets into the brain, the immune cells in the brain are called microglia, and when those microglia get turned on, they don't have an off switch. They just keep churning out those inflammatory chemicals until they die, which is reportedly 2 to 3 months. So I'll have some patients tell me, oh, I don't eat much gluten, once a week or once a month. And I tell them, well, you're just staying in that constantly inflamed state. And what happens when we have inflammation in the brain is, well, it affects different people in different ways, but it can affect different structures in the brain, and certainly can manifest as anxiety, depression, cognitive problems, ADHD, all of those factors.
So I'm assuming a lot of people coming to you directly for gut issues, but I want to hear some stories of people coming in they might have had depression, anxiety, they might have had, acne or something, and you've been like, oh, actually, let's fix your gut.
I've had plenty of patients like that, and what I say, those are gut-associated symptoms, and you don't have to have any symptoms in your gut to have a gut-associated condition. So one of my great examples was a patient early on in my career. She had been to about 5 different dermatologists. She was breaking out in hives. No one could figure out where the hives were coming from. So, and I'm thinking, okay, why are you here to see me? Now, this is a lot of pressure. Like, I have to figure out why you have hives. And you've been to like the top dermatologists in New York City, and they haven't been able to figure this out. So how am I, I was early on in my career in getting into the gut, and I'm like, okay, you know what, let's do an experiment. She was eating a lot of wheat-based stuff, bread, pasta. And so she was very kind of like, what, I need to change my diet. So I said, you know what, let's not think of this forever. Let's just do this for the next 4 weeks. And you'll come back and meet with me in 4 weeks. These are all the foods that I want you to avoid. These are the substitutions you can have. So she comes back 4 weeks later, and her hives are diminished like 75%. And nothing had done that. So she was quite pleased, and I said, well, do you think, why don't we continue this for another 4 weeks? Let's see where we get. Knowing that I probably would have to tell her, you know what, you're going to have to avoid wheat going forward. But we avoided it for another 4 weeks, and the hives completely disappeared. Western medicine would have treated this as a skin issue and let me give you steroid cream, or maybe let me put you on rounds of oral steroids. But that's one example of a patient that came in and had no gut symptoms whatsoever.
If somebody eats wheat and they are told by their doctor that they are not a celiac and they can eat wheat. I've heard dietitians say it, I've heard doctors say it, and they'll say, well, you're not a celiac so you can eat wheat, don't worry about it. But when you eat wheat, you don't feel good. You bloat, or you have aches and pains, or you get migraines, or you have anxiety. Why do it? If you eliminate it and then your doctor says, no, you're not a celiac, you go back to it, and it just, it affects you so much. Why would you continue to consume it? In 2012, Alicia Fasano out of Harvard University, amazing professor, coined the term non-celiac gluten sensitive, or sensitivity. And that was everything but apart from being diagnosed as celiac. So that's just the gut issue. But he termed that, that phrase, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, because he noticed that people who ate wheat had other maladies that were happening, and they were very similar to mine. So I didn't know about Alicia Fasano when I figured this out. But I was having aches and pains, dry skin, dry hair, my hair wouldn't grow. I always had pixie cut short hair until I gave up wheat, and then it just grew. It was phenomenal. My skin, I used to scratch it because it was so dry. As soon as I gave up wheat, my skin I don't even have to put moisturizer on my skin anymore. So those were things that happened, within 12 months, but quick symptoms like aches and pains disappeared in that 3-week period. It was phenomenal. And so I get people to do an elimination and just see what happens.
We know that when somebody is really allergic to gluten, which I certainly was, there's these little villi that line the gut. And they're like little finger-like projections, and they absorb our nutrients from our food. And when you actually have a gluten allergy, those things get chopped off and blunted. And it takes about 8 months for those villi to regrow when you stop your gluten for somebody that's gluten sensitive. And it's interesting, I learned that after the fact. And when I thought about my timeline, I thought, about 8 months on that diet is when I started to make some headway. So we'll see when we eliminate things for some people in their diet, like my patient with severe depression. she just eliminated gluten and dairy, and you know, in 4 to 6 weeks she was a new woman. Some people, we see that, it's fantastic. Other people are very, very sick. Their gut is very, you know, inflamed and leaky, and it, you know, it may take a long time, but I think it's really important to empower people to stay that course, because it will give you results if you keep going and work on all those factors.
The elimination diet can be done as basically an all or none type of deal, where you take out the most reactive foods out there. So for example, like in my program, it's wheat, gluten, dairy, soy, corn, peanuts. I do take out a lot of legumes because a lot of people get very gassy with legumes. And of course, anything that's GMO, genetically modified, trying to emphasize foods that are organic. If you do eat meat, pasture-raised, grass-fed, hormone-free, antibiotic-free. If you eat fish, wild-caught fish. But removing the most reactive foods for at least a period of, I like to say 6 weeks. You know, I would say minimum is 4 weeks. And then you can do a reintroduction one by one. But in practicality, what I see is a lot of my patients come in, everybody's working, you know, 12 hours a day, they're overwhelmed. So to tell them to eliminate 5 foods all at once, they're gonna be like, you're setting them up for failure. Like, I don't know where to begin. So another way that I do an elimination with patients is I kind of do a stepwise elimination. So I stack it in, starting with like dairy and gluten, because those are the two, I would say, top reactors. And asking the person, you know, which one, you know, do a food history, diet history, and see, okay, which one is easier? You're not really eating a lot of dairy, so do you think you could remove dairy first? And let's do that for 2 weeks. And let's get really good at identifying where there is dairy, like if you're eating out, like really starting to know, like ask about sauces, creams and soups, like places where dairy might be hidden. Get confident and good at that, and then we'll add in the next one.
I can't stress how powerful it can be when you remove these triggering foods from your diet. And I know this from personal experience. It was actually after I eliminated wheat that I started to see a dramatic turnaround in my own health. I struggled with autoimmune disease for years, never knowing what was wrong with me or what I needed to fix. I ate well, I slept long, I exercised, I took supplements, but it wasn't until I learned about the impact of wheat on gut health that I was able to turn my life around. Now, this was so interesting to me because I had been tested for celiac disease multiple times and my results always came back negative. But you don't need to be celiac for wheat to be an issue for you. So, if you haven't already, I really encourage you to try an elimination diet. It's so simple and it's free, and it really could change your life, like it did for me. But for now, we'll move on to supplement protocols for gut repair. Supplements should never be your focus or solo protocol, but a complement to a changed lifestyle and diet. You'll hear about many great supplements throughout the series, but our first suggestion for repairing leaky gut is L-glutamine.
Supplements really important when someone has intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, okay? Because I akin this to, let's just take gluten for example. If someone has gluten sensitivity and they have leaky gut as a result of eating gluten, gluten will be the cigarette butt that you throw in the forest that started the forest fire. Now, once you throw that cigarette butt in the forest and the forest fire is burning, do you have to throw any more cigarette butt in the forest to keep the fire burning? Or that forest fire is already just going to burn out of control, right? It's going to burn on its own, whether you throw any more cigarette butts in there. So if you cut out gluten and you have leaky gut, cutting out gluten is like you stop throwing cigarette butt in the forest, but the fire is still burning. What are you doing to putting out the fire? You're not adding any more fire, but what are you doing to put it out? So in the forest fire example, there's got to be rain or a firefighter's got to come in and put it out. In real life example in health, then cutting out gluten is what you got to eliminate to stop creating more leaky gut, but you also have to heal the gut. That's where supplementation is really important. And you can do it through diet, but left to its own devices, it might take you a year or two to completely heal the gut. And most people just assume that, oh, maybe month 6, I don't see any result, I quit. That's a shame. So using supplement can speed up that process.
What are some of these supplements?
So, it's more about, so there's a lot of products out there on the market, but it's really the overlying, if you evaluate all the product, in general, all the leaky gut supplements, most of them will contain L-glutamine.
L-glutamine is a great one. L-glutamine is awesome. Now, if you have certain genetic SNPs or certain genetic mutations, taking L-glutamine isn't the best option for you because you're going to build up glutamate levels in your brain and it's going to give you anxiety, or it could cause problems with you sleeping or make you feel agitated, right? And so if we can't use that, we can use a combination of other amino acid therapies. We can use things like marshmallow root also. Butyrate also works very, very well to help repair the lining of the gut.
Mm-hmm. So for people that can tolerate L-glutamine, what is that good for?
It helps to rebuild the mucosal lining of the gut. And we have to put that mucosal barrier back in so that the lining of the gut can actually not be wilted and exposed and sick anymore. We have to put that mucosal barrier back on there because that's what's protecting it.
Wow.
And that's where the bacteria live. They live inside of that the good bacteria, right? They live within the mucosal lining. That's where that ecosystem is. So we've got to give the body different ingredients so that the body can make that. And obviously probiotics are an important component of any gut repair program.
One of the really good amino acids that I like for gut repair is L-glutamine, which has many other uses as well. I actually use it in people who are addicted to anything from alcohol to sugar and what beyond, because it acts on the brain to stop cravings. I mean, I had one woman who sent me a letter saying, I don't know what's in glutamine, but I'm an alcoholic, and I think I'd read something you'd written about glutamine. I bought some, and the other night, it was late at night, and I wanted to go out and get a drink, but I thought, I'll just try this. And she tried it. She said, and I didn't drink, and I didn't go out, and I was fine, and I've been taking it ever since, and I'm not drinking. What happened? What was in there? I said, it's glutamine. It does that.
Wow.
You can take 500 to 1,000 of glutamine in a capsule, open up the capsule, stick it under your tongue, and it dissolves. That's when you're using it acutely. Otherwise, I tell people just take 1,000 milligrams twice a day. But in this case, she was like, oh, I'm going to have a drink. And that did it. Or people have sugar cravings, particularly in the evening. That's very often people want to have their ice cream at night or their cake or whatever and if they can just remember to take some glutamine, stick it under their tongue, they're home free.
What's happening there? Why would cravings
It
stop?
acts like sugar in the brain. So it gives the brain what it's looking for. So you don't have, it short circuits it.
The thing that I think is most important, and if you're watching this, I can't stress it enough, it all starts in the gut. And so there are so many different health issues that we're dealing with today. I mean, the cancer, the stroke, the Alzheimer's, the dementia, and I'm not saying that the gut is the only thing related to any of those things, but I cannot tell you how many issues, if we work on the gut and work on correcting those imbalances, the whole body gets better. And your brain will work better, and you'll have more energy and more joy and more ability to go out and be with your family and be running around with your grandkids or doing the things that you want to do. And a lot of people don't think that the head and the gut are connected, or the gut and your ankle pain are connected. But guess what? They are. And so it really does start there. So I encourage you, if you do not have the health level that you want, if you're not feeling energized, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not feeling happy, if you're feeling achy and painful all day, look at the gut. It's really where it all begins.
We know chronic diseases are on the rise,
and we know autoimmune disease is on the rise, diabetes is on the rise, cancer is on the rise, obesity is on the rise. And we are not figuring out what is the root cause. And what we have to be conscious of is that a majority of our immune system lives in our gut. Our brain hormones are made in our gut. Our detoxification system is connected to our gut. So if we continue to ignore the gut, we're going to continue to see these things moving in a direction we cannot afford to see them moving. So what people need to do is start educating themselves on what type of foods are anti-inflammatory, what type of enzymes and probiotics can be profoundly impactful on gut health. People need to start making dietary changes and take action, not tomorrow, not a week from now, not a month from now, right away. And it does not take long to see results. So when you are seeing and feeling better, then you're more motivated to stick to this longer. And a true test is when you introduce something bad in, you're going to be very conscious of what that food was doing to you when you used to eat it all the time. Right now, you're not a good specimen. You have a lot of inflammation, you have poor gut health, but when you get your gut healthy, you'll never want to live any other way.
I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of the conditions that contribute to poor gut health and feel empowered to improve your health and vitality. We've only just scratched the surface of the myriad of factors that can contribute to an imbalanced gut flora and the multitude of health problems that can manifest as a result. I hope you're as excited as I am about the opportunity to take control of your health. In order to do so, you'll need to understand many factors that damage our gut, and you'll want to know about all the tools that are available to you for healing yourself. In the next episode, we'll investigate two all too common ailments: irritable bowel syndrome and small intestine bacterial overgrowth. We'll reveal the surprising causes of these disorders and, of course, teach you how to soothe your symptoms and heal the imbalances that underlie your discomfort. But before you go, I have one more thing I want to talk to you about. You see, as you've been watching this series, I'm sure you've had someone special come to mind as you've been watching. It might be a sister or your wife or your son or a cousin or a co-worker or a friend that you've been thinking about that you know would really benefit from hearing this information. Unfortunately, it's likely that it will take a long time for this information to reach the average doctor, because the thing is, we don't have big wealthy businesses and corporations backing the Gut Solution series. We rely on people like you sharing the message and joining the mission to get the tools for gut health out to the rest of the world. So your loved ones need your help, and this is how you can help them: by sharing the message. We've made it easy for you by putting buttons just beneath this video so you can share with your loved ones by email or by Facebook, or you can just text them to let them know where to find this information. So join the movement. Together we can get this information out to the whole world and to all the people that need to hear this information the most. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.